Hi everyone, my name is Inilek Wilmot and I am presenting on behalf of my colleagues who are just listed, Dr. Aiken, Mr. Kong, and Mr. Squire. And I think she did a great job introducing the talk. All right, so we'll be looking at the need for fish sanctuaries in Jamaica, why there was a need, the procedure that was followed in setting them up, the sanctuaries that exist today in 2023, changes that have been observed within and around fish sanctuaries, issues and solutions, and what the future may look like. So Jamaica has been overfished from the 1970s with reduced biodiversity and most of the top predators going missing. There are no protected areas at the time and a lack of political will to change the situation. No fisheries kind of focused on protected area. This led to a plateau in reef fish yield in the 1980s, and that situation was further impacted by invasive species since about 2007. However, in 2008, with some policy improvement and the establishment of a fisheries advisory board, a fish sanctuary subcommittee was later established, and this committee led the effort to create a network of fish sanctuaries in collaboration with fisherfolk organizations, NGOs, and private sector entities. Several potential areas were carefully identified and assessed by the then Fisheries Division staff, which is now the National Fisheries Authority. The sites were selected based on the presence of relatively healthy coral reefs, moderate to large numbers of coral reef associated fish year-round. Adjoining healthy mangrove growth was seen as an ideal kind of setup. Relatively unpolluted waters and relatively low human population and physical development in close proximity to the area. Additionally, it was identified that it would be important to have an NGO or a community-based group that could co-manage the area. A designation should not displace large number of fishers so that it impacts their ability to earn a livelihood. And the government at the time really looked for areas where there was relatively strong support from the fishing community. There was also a stipulation that a minimum size of 10 squared kilometers would be necessary or ideal. So after significant consultation, ground truthing, verification, which is denoted in this slide, several stakeholders were engaged and the government really did due diligence. Funding was identified and the boundaries were established and gazetted for the fish sanctuaries. MOUs were then signed with the managing entities, and then we were off undertaking the management of these protected areas, with partial funding being provided on a consistent year-to-year basis by the government through the National Fisheries Authority. Here we have a map showing the distribution of these fish sanctuaries, and as you can see, quite a broad distribution right around the coastal shelf of the island. And there's also an offshore out by the Pedro Keys, also representation of that habitat type. So fairly good distribution seen. So there has been some significant improvements in fish stock. This graph here is showing the length of fish, over the change in length of fish over the years between 2011 and 2017 within fish sanctuaries. And we see an increase from about 7 centimeters average length to over 20 centimeters average fish length within sanctuaries. And this graph is showing the overall fish biomass in grams per 100 meters squared. and we see a significant increase in fish biomass within the sanctuaries. These data are coming from annual surveys that are done by the National Environment and Planning Agency in their effort to monitor coral reefs right around the island. They have some sites that are within fish sanctuaries. All right, so the great results were achieved, with some problems being faced. The legal process, the setting up of the sanctuaries, so there were some legal challenges that were faced in terms of timeline and some innovations that were dealt with. Logistics of the assessment, there was a lot of work being done by the authority. And then, of course, getting the NGOs ready to partake in management. So the future includes an expansion of the network to support achieving 30% of coastline being protected. There are plans for 2 new fish sanctuaries this year in 2023. There's a need for more organized fisherfolk groups to be able to participate in management and facilitate this expansion of the fish sanctuary network. And we do believe that the future can be bright if these stakeholders continue to work closely together. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you alluded to a bright future once we work closely together, kind of, launch padding off what Dr. Gittin spoke about. All right, so I see that Mr. Kong raised his hand, and then Pranaya Parida. So Kong and then Parida, go ahead with your question or comment, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just want to mention some success factors that have contributed, some additional success factors to the fish sanctuary. Firstly, the many dedicated stakeholders. You cannot leave that out. One of the key success factors are the stakeholders that were involved in this process, including my co-authors, Dr. Aiken, Mr. Squire, and indeed Mr. Wilmot, who is critical in the direct management of a couple of these no-take protected areas. Secondly, another important factor is the establishment of the Fisheries Management and Development Fund, which is a legally constituted fund where the primary revenue source is 100% of an export levy imposed on the Queen Kong fishery. So the fishery, the Queen Kong fishery, is providing revenue to support management and development of the sector. So, and it is through, though the contributions are far from enough, these funds from the FMDF has been a significant contributor to sustaining the operations of the fish sanctuary. Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome, and thank you for highlighting that. And again, we're seeing stakeholder buy-in as being critical. Our Pranaya Parida.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. It was a very good presentation. I'm having small queries, like for how many years we should declare a particular area for particular species as a sanctuary. Because in an environment, if you're talking about biological science, then it will grow up to a certain extent. After that, the growth will there will be no growth. So after certain years, you should harvest a certain amount from that area, so that the environment, it can become kind of a sustainable, or else it is like there will be not much of recruitment in that same area. So I would like to know for how many years a sanctuary should be declared as a sanctuary. So there should be some calculation. Second thing, how this sanctuary has kind of a support in terms of increasing the fish production nearby area. So if you are having some kind of information regarding this, this will be kind of additional thing for the sanctuaries. So thank you.
Yes, so within our legislation, once a sanctuary is established, it is in law and it is there until the only way to remove it would be for the government to remove it. So they're intended to be permanent. However, there's been some innovation. The government has implemented one rotating sanctuary scenario where there are sections of the sanctuaries that open and close to allow for fishing. So this is innovative. We're yet to really have the data to see how that has performed. Another aspect of how a lot of the sanctuaries are managed, as Mr. Kong said, significant stakeholder involvement. So the local fishers and the fisherfolk organizations are on the boards of several of the sanctuaries. So if it is that the sanctuaries, I know, so this is, you know, even the rotating sanctuary idea, this came out of fishers being involved at the board level and being involved in discussions and so forth. Hopefully that provides some insight. And I see Mr. Kong has raised his hand to contribute more.
Yeah, I will just add into the points, like when we are calculating the BMSY values, biomass MSY values for that particular environment, if you are having some kind of data for that, then we can say at the BMSY level, we can have allowable catch even in case of sanctuary with, I mean, in consultation with the stakeholders. So there should be some kind of allowable harvest from the sanctuary. So the environment can be kind of having a continuous recruitment in the same area, kind of.
Okay, yeah, I understand that point. Yes, I would say that we have other mechanisms under our legal system. We have management areas that can be declared where like that type of management approach would be more suitable. The fish sanctuaries are seen as, you know, no-take zones, but we do have that possibility under our laws, and I think it's something that we will be exploring. We have a new law that came out in 2018 that came into effect, and so this new law allows for a lot of these innovations.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And the second question regarding how the sanctuary has improved the fish production in the nearby area. Is there any documentary?
Yes, it wasn't presented here, but there was a study between 2013 and 15, which documented a threefold increase in biomass in areas, you know, within about 500 meters of the boundary of one fish sanctuary.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, so in the interest of time, I do see two hands. So I'm going to ask Mr. Kong and Mr. Horton to make their comments quickly so we can move on to the next presentation. Mr. Kong?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. This is a complicated discussion, or can be. So, but might I recommend that we exchange contacts and have this further? I will relent to Mr. Horton. But just very quickly, the areas are chosen based on critical habitats and the ecosystem, the protection of the ecosystem. We're talking about sensitive critical habitats, which are nursery areas, coral reef, mangrove, seagrass bed, and that sort of thing. Protection must continue long term and forever, as far as I'm concerned. So let us exchange contacts so we can understand, you know, some of the issues that are being raised here. Thanks, Jim.
I think it's worth emphasizing that the situation in Jamaica, there are two unique things that I see. The fact is, the new fisheries legislation that came into effect in 2018 has a very elaborate scheme to pursue marine managed area, marine protected area, however they are defined, or fish sanctuaries. And actually, there are a range of protected areas that are possible with slightly different objectives and focus and priorities. The fish sanctuaries that have been established and that are being pursued quite aggressively are really meant to be protected areas in the full sense. These are areas that should be reserved for biodiversity and fisheries conservation. There are provisions for multiple use areas, and there are various names. And so there's a lot of flexibility there, and that's that's one of the key things that I think we need to understand. And I think a part of the rationale that is driving this is the commitment to achieve this 30% protection of your marine space by 2030. And as you know, many of our countries have committed themselves legally to achieving this target, which is extremely difficult. And so the person who asked the question about the fishers and their role and so on, you know, that's a very important issue that we have to bear in mind, because in most cases, fishers are, I would say, on the side a bit in terms of what is happening with these areas. Most of these are managed by NGOs, unlike in some other places where we know fishers are integral in the management, not just stakeholders to be consulted, but in the actual management. So very interesting what is happening, and we have seen significant developments in recent years since this new act and came into force, and a renewed commitment to strengthen fisheries and marine biodiversity conservation and protection in Jamaica. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Horton. Thank you. And yes, this is certainly a discussion that could take us quite into some time. So we thank you, Mr. Wilmot, and the other authors of this paper and this presentation.